Hello everyone, I'm Craig A. Woodward.
And I'm James A. Moores.
I'm the Idiot, and he's the Bohemian, and even if this is your first time here, welcome back to The Broken Quill. Our topic today is death of the author, and problematic authors. Yeah, this is going to be an interesting topic. We should probably preface this with the whole get your salt shakers ready because this is opinion and you'll need a few grains caveat. So, James, what do we mean when we say death of the author and problematic authors?
Well, I don't really like putting death of the author with the suggestion of problematic authors. I also don't really like the concept of problematic authors to begin with. I'm going to have a singular talk about my specific feelings in this regard to come, but for now, I feel that this is a hot button topic in the past few months, and one way people have been trying to get around moral quandaries is by using the term death of the author to get around that. Death of the author is a literary critical device brought about by French theorist Roland Barthes in 1967 to suggest that we, as scholarly critics, specifically in the new critical theory of critical review, need to separate the work from the author. Basically, that is to say, when we analyze the text under death of the author, we can only pull from examples within the textual work, and not by analyzing what the author has said or is saying about the work. It isn't talking about morality, capitalism, ethics, or anything of that nature. What it's saying is that if you're doing a true critical review of a work, it is as if the author had died the moment they released their work. They are not here for you to analyze, criticize, or discuss what you think the work is saying.
So your gripe is with the misuse as a form of justification. It does feel that way. I don't imagine it's possible for us to discuss this topic without the currently controversial Rowling situation. Whatever side of the fence you're on, whether it be against her, for her, or not yet sure, there is a current issue regarding the ethical consumption of her work for various stances she's taken, and many have been attempting to use death of the author as justification for the continued consumption of those works, but as you explained, that is not what death of the author is about. I would probably say that such a decision is outside that field entirely, and falls on your personal morality and your willingness to stand by it. If you are a person that is against Rowling for what she has said, and choose to still buy her works, that is simply a statement of your value of entertainment being higher than your ethics, which is understandable. For most people, they are. Ethics are hard, really hard. Most people don't live up to them, so it just makes you human. But death of the author is hardly a good scapegoat to help you sleep at night. But on the subject of the controversy, ethics and the like, the nature of new critical review and death of the author, I personally find to be an interesting one. There's a school of theoretical critical study, I think it's called the reader response criticism, but that might be wrong, that basically says it's impossible to perform any kind of critical review, new historicist or new critical, due to unconscious bias. Do you feel the actions of problematic authors could impact the new critical reviews of works as they move forward due to unconscious bias?
Well, anyone who tells you that there is no bias is biased in thinking that. There's always bias. Everything has bias, because everything is made from the human mind, and in the end, the human mind is biased.
That's a lot of bias.
Well, that's just the cost of doing business. There are many different literary theories, and the school I most often find myself falling into is New Critic. I feel that New Critic is the least affected by outside bias because that specific school of literary criticism says you are not allowed to bring in statements of the author. Death of the author is one of the tenets of our faith. Not so much with new historicists or the sub-schools of reader response like Marxist theory, psychoanalytical theory, or any of the other schools that specifically relate to how we, the reader, relate to a work. For reader response, everything that might affect the reader is taken into account, so in that way, it is literally impossible to remove the author and their living statements from how a reader interprets the work. It's possible the reader may not have heard anything about an author when they picked up a work to read, or it's possible they were told outright falsehoods about the author, especially when we're talking about early authors who most modern readers know nothing about. Or we know nothing about the Gawain poet, including his name. He's called simply the Gawain poet, because whoever he was, he wrote Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. So there are instances where bias is long since dead, can't affect how we view a work. But aha! The reader response theorist says, the fact that you don't know their name is a part of the mystique. It's mysterious. It makes it a long-lost work that could be magical or part of a trove of hidden knowledge. Ergo, bias. New Criticism says no. When you're forming a literary theory about the meaning of a work, the evidence for that theory may only come from the work itself. Nothing outside can be specifically cited in your arguments. Death of the author is a tool we, in true critical analysis, not review, wield in order to understand and dissect a work. It does not inform whether or not you should or should not read or buy or promote a work or author. It cares not for these things. No more does a nail care for the reason it was hammered into a wall.
Does critical analysis say anything about morality?
No, it's simply how we interpret works.
Then why are people using it?
Well, I think most people are using it because either they don't understand how we do critical analysis. I am sure some of these terms are foreign to our listeners because why wouldn't they be? New criticism, new historicist, reader response. These are technical terms. I might as well throw a unfiltered paper of Stephen Hawking and expect everyone, including myself, to fully understand them. Literary thought, criticism, and analysis is a technical field, and most people don't interact with.
So most reviews aren't true literary criticism?
I'm sure some are, but most are just people talking. They're saying whether they think a book is good to read, or should you not read it. Critical theory cares not for this either. We read everything.
Wait a minute. So, is that making it permissible to buy and read works by problematic authors?
Well, of course not. It's not a judgment. It's not permission. If a problematic work is out there, it is out there. You cannot put the genie back in the bottle, nor the cat back in the bag. It won't like that, I've tried. This isn't about ethics. This isn't about whether or not you should or should not buy or ethically or morally interact with a work. It's about understanding why that work is problematic. A quote I love from Romeo Dallaire in regards to the Rwandan genocide is, "I know there is a God, because in Rwanda I shook hands with the devil. I have seen him. I have smelled him, and I have touched him. I know the devil exists, and therefore I know there is a God." Romeo Dallaire campaigned for a long time for the United Nations to become involved in the Rwandan genocide. He could speak authoritatively upon the matter because he was there. He spoke with the dictator whom he referred to as the devil. He had shaken his hand. Perhaps you could say that this was morally wrong of him to do. He didn't approve the dictator or what he was doing, but he was there. He did everything he could to stop it. Therein lies one of the problems. We in the Ivory Tower don't read books for fun. It's not about getting enjoyment out of them. It's not about saying, I want to enjoy this book. It's a good read afternoon tea. It's about understanding. It's about history. And the literary criticism world has read far worse books by far worse people, because by doing so, by shaking hands with the devil, we might be able to understand more about the devil, and maybe how we can stop it in the future. Most people read for fun, and they feel awkward about reading problematic authors, but they use the terms we use that allow us to do our work to cover over a moral quandary which they should not be coming to us to answer.
So this is about the concept of censorship or book burning or control of banned books. You're saying that even if a person is incredibly problematic, their work should not only still see the light of day, but absolutely must be consumed and analysed. For without said context and understanding, it cannot be understood why it's problematic in the first place.
That's basically it. In the case of JK Rowling specifically, many authors have come out not in support of her, or of what she has said, but of her right to do it. One of these authors is Margaret Atwood, a famed Canadian feminist hero and a supporter of trans rights. She also spoke out in support of Rowling's right to expression. I may not agree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. Absolutely everything must be analyzed, but I want to push back a little on what you say consumed. When a novel is purchased for, as I said, consumption, it is for a broad audience, for everyone to read and to enjoy. The theory of literary criticism also cares not for this. Every work should be analyzed, but we care about works that form an important basis for things, and we certainly don't think that a work should be consumed. We must critically understand when we read a problematic work that it is problematic. We analyze it to explain what is so dangerous about it, what is so painful about it, and why it hurts people. And then we explain why the book is hurtful. But we don't burn it, we don't destroy it, and we certainly don't tell anyone they cannot read it. As I have often said, even if you find yourself a left-wing democratic socialist, one of the most important books for you to read is Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, because that book forms so much of modern right-wing and libertarian thought that if you simply ignore it because of the libertarian views of its authors, which you find problematic, you will be missing a large reason as to what makes that viewpoint you so vehemently fight against. So Craig, let me ask you a difficult question, if I may.
I temper my sense of intellect and prepare to make myself look a fool.
Oh, don't worry. I doubt you will, Prince Mushkin. As a fantasy writer, as someone whose place is to write that genre of fiction, what do you take away from everyone who is trying to use H.P. Lovecraft as a way of deflection? They introduce that in the conversation as a way of saying, if you denigrate my author, you must also denigrate your author. Or more succinctly, if you say I can't read my book, you can't read yours. What do you think of that?
I'd say it's a false equivalence, or at least a shitty way of putting your point across. Let's face it, if you want to do a new historicist review of Lovecraft, you have to take into account his racism, and by all means look for it and find it likely within the work as well. I'm sure there's direct and allegory aplenty, and you'd be right in considering him problematic. However, Lovecraft was vitally responsible for changing the face of fantasy horror itself. He invented a whole new subgenre of horror and influenced more than most scarcely realize or could possibly imagine. To understand today's fantasy or horror or anything, even much sci-fi, requires you to understand Lovecraft. I recognize there is legitimate argument to be made in the potential repercussions of Harry Potter in the field of fantasy. But please, wake me up when it becomes less probability and more factual.
Alright, then here's your wake-up call. Ender's Game. Here we have a living author who is incredibly homophobic. Yet, his work, Ender's Game, we can't get away from in science fiction. It is important. It's not probability. It's fact. So here's where things get strange. Ender's Game is oft cited as highly pro-LGBTQ. One of its major themes is accepting people no matter who they are, and doing everything you can to protect and care for them. Ender, after nearly killing the entire alien race, takes the aliens' eggs and becomes their strongest advocate, the speaker for the dead. We have a book by someone who takes every single dollar given to him and uses it to attack LGBTQ people, but his work seems to say nothing about it. It's in fact considered very positive to LGBTQ people. Many have commented on this duality. What do you think of this?
Well, that's what I mean by possibility versus fact. All art has a potential power and a solidified power. No one can deny the power of Picasso, no one can deny the power of Van Gogh, but the power of a brand new artist on the block? There's a reason art increases in price after death, and it isn't because it suddenly becomes rare or their death legitimately adds value. It is because that ever-changing system of what their art represents becomes solidified, as the work shall no longer be added to. It's to allow the dust to settle, to see where the chips fall, and hopefully it'll be on the right side of history. Ender's Game has proven to be wonderfully pro-LGBT. It has had impact on the community within reading and review circles. It has done good, despite its author's fervent efforts to the contrary. Rowling, however, has created massive waves in the fantasy community, enough to be remembered, enough to even be studied, but has she been copied yet? Has she inspired a new subgenre? Did we see a swarm of new magic school stories after Harry Potter finished up and people wanted to cash in or be a part of that system? There were one or two, to my memory, but it wasn't a huge windfall, as I'm sure many expected it to be. And Rowling herself hasn't let Harry Potter settle. She adds to it, focuses on the movies with creative control, tweets out her thoughts and input, and actively makes Pottermore change its contents to fit her new narrative, so it contradicts the things that she's said in the past. Need we look no less further than McGonagall's age to see this due to the issues with the second Fantastic Beasts movie? She has not let the dust settle. Reading Ivory Tower, to my understanding, view her work as one that will most definitely become a classic. It will settle, it will have influence. But it hasn't yet. She hasn't let it. And we haven't seen the result of that settle. We haven't seen where the breadth of Harry Potter and the Harry Potter world will take the fantasy genre. And until we can say for sure just how influential it will be, it will actually be to the literary field, her work is no more influential than even my own. And that is to say, non-existent.
No, the comments will have fun with that one. But in the meantime, what do we do in the meantime?
We stand by our guns. Or don't. As I said, it is a fact. It is a fact that humans find ethics difficult. I want to reiterate what I said in the beginning. This whole concept of separating the artist from the work, it doesn't happen. You can't. You can in critical review. You can if you're writing a critical essay on the contents and the themes of the book. But you can't in terms of your consumption and your spending habits. If you buy her works yet you hate her stance, you are actively stating that your entertainment is more important than your ethics, which, as I've said twice now, is human. I have made such sacrifice of my own ethics plenty of times in the past. It is a difficult thing to resist, especially when we're in such a state of the world that requires so much entertaining distraction, or we might actually go mad. Besides, Lord knows it's hard to find an old author that wasn't problematic. And as for the comments having fun with my answer about her influence being non-existent, I welcome the discussion. I am sure many that loved her in their youth, as, by the way, I did too. They will stamp and shout that she is influential, but I would be very interested in examples. I am sure you, James, could go into a full reading and discussion of the influence of Ender's Game within literary circles. But I've yet to hear any kind of discussion capable of Rowling other than the words, she's influential, with zero context as to what she's actually influenced and how. She will be. I definitely think that she will be very influential and form an interesting foundation in fantasy as the years go on. But we have not seen the result of that solidified yet. It's too permeable right now. The dust has not settled. I'm sure I'm going to be blasted in the comments either way, as you've said. Oh well, maybe what I had to say will at least be, I don't know, interesting in some way? And what you've said, maybe? If it was, if you've got any thoughts on what we've said, let us know in the comments. Like, subscribe, hit the bell. I'm Craig A. Woodward.
And I'm James A. Moores.
And we look forward to seeing you again on The Broken Quill. The comments are going to have a field day.